this. Kristen Jacobson.
When you deal with anxiety, it's really common to have anxiety about your anxiety. But let's get something straight. You're probably not as good at predicting your future feelings as you think you are. No offense, I'm not either. None of us are. Psychologists have a name for this, and it's called affective forecasting. And it's our brain's attempt to guess how we'll feel in the future, but most of the time those guesses are way off. And this matters a lot, especially if you deal with anxiety, perfectionism, or feel totally thrown off by uncertainty. When your brain predicts the future will feel horrible, you'll pretty much do anything to avoid. So this creates overthinking, panic, procrastination, or bailing on things that could actually help you grow. So let's talk a little bit about why we're so bad at affective forecasting, what it does to our mental health, and how to get a little bit more strategic about it. So affective forecasting is the brain's attempt to predict how we'll feel in response to future events. Will this make me happy? Will this wreck me emotionally? We ask ourselves these questions constantly, and science shows that we usually get it wrong. Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert has really done a lot of research on this, and he finds that we overestimate how intensely and how long we'll feel emotions, both good and bad. So you think landing the perfect job will change your life, or that getting broken up with will destroy you, but the actual emotional impact tends to be much smaller and fades a lot faster than we originally expect. And so this screw up has a name too. It's called impact bias. And it's your brain's habit of blowing emotional predictions out of proportion. So you're not broken, it's just how our brains work, but let's break down what's going wrong behind the scenes. One is that you focus too much on one thing. So when something big is coming up, like a move, a tough conversation, or a work deadline, you tend to focus only on that one event. You sort of have tunnel vision, and you forget that you'll still be eating meals, or watching Netflix at night, or walking the dog, or texting your best friend. The other stuff actually cushions your emotional reaction, but your brain doesn't factor all of that other stuff in. And this is called focalism. So it makes your forecast feel high stakes and all-consuming, leading to an overestimation of its actual emotional impact and the duration of that. Number two is you underestimate your ability to bounce back. This is resilience, right? Your brain doesn't always remember how resilient you actually are. You've survived all of your worst days, but when you look ahead, you tend to forget that you'll adjust. And this is called immune neglect, when we ignore the ways we naturally recover from and cope with stress. And number three is you assume future you is the same as current you. So you know how your music taste or favorite food can change over time? The same thing happens with your emotional reactions, but we forget that. We think our future self will want the same things, hate the same things, react the same way, and this is known as the end of history illusion. It tricks us into thinking we've hit our final form, emotionally speaking, that we're in this stable, unchanging state, but we're always growing. So how does affective forecasting trigger anxiety? Well, here's where it gets messy. If you're already prone to anxiety, this whole faulty forecasting things really turns into a trap. So let's say you have social anxiety. You predict that going to a party will be humiliating, so you skip it. But that prediction is probably wrong. The party might have awkward moments, but you might have also had a decent conversation, or at least walked away with a good story. But by avoiding it, you never learned that your emotional predictions were off. And so this avoidance actually keeps the anxiety alive. Same goes for people with perfectionism. You assume that messing up at work will feel unbearable, like you'll just spiral for days. So in turn, you overwork, you stress, you micromanage, but then in reality, the emotional hit would have been short-lived and you would have coped. So anxiety and affective forecasting are sort of like toxic best friends. Each one makes the other worse. And then you bring in uncertainty, right? Affective forecasting becomes even less accurate when you're facing uncertainty. When you don't know exactly what's coming, your brain fills in the blanks with those worst case scenarios. And it assumes that the emotional outcome will be terrible because it hates not knowing. And when you're already wired for anxiety, this really ramps up fast. You start planning, overthinking, and preparing for that emotional fallout that may actually never come. So how do we stop letting bad forecasts control our lives? You don't have to be at the mercy of your faulty emotional guesses. And here are some things that actually help. One is to look back, not just ahead. So think about the last time you were nervous or anxious about something. How did it actually feel? Did you survive it? Was it worse in your head than in real life? Past experience is really your best reality check. So try even keeping a log of the times that you got through something challenging so that you have something concrete to refer back to. Number 2 is to let future you have a say. So you're going to grow. Your emotions, your preferences, your reactions, they will all shift. So stop making decisions based on what today you wants or is fearful of. You can't control a lot of things, but you can control how much you trust in yourself to be resilient to whatever comes your way. And this is something that I see show up in my clients a lot. They're so focused on external factors that are either out of their control or that are future focused, where that uncertainty lies, when in reality they have to turn inward and build up that trust in their own resilience. Number 3 is to talk to someone who's been there. So someone who's done the thing you're dreading probably has a more accurate and rational take on how it might feel. Use that information instead of just trusting your anxious brain, which is naturally going to be irrational and catastrophize. So somebody outside of yourself can really provide a reality check as well. And then 4 is don't trust the worst case scenario. Your brain thinks it's protecting you by prepping for disaster, but most of the time it's just making you anxious. Again, I mentioned that anxiety about anxiety. So challenge the idea that you have to feel terrible. You might not. And also consider the best case scenario. And then imagine everything in between. Because most of the time, things don't occur in worst or best extremes. They fall somewhere in the middle. So effective forecasting sounds like this fancy psych term, but it explains a lot of our day-to-day stress. It's the reason we stay stuck in jobs we hate, avoid dating, or panic about conversations that we haven't even had yet. So you can't stop your brain from making these emotional predictions, but you can stop believing they're accurate, especially when anxiety is really loud and the future feels uncertain. So don't let bad guesses make your decisions for you. I hope this video was helpful. I would love to hear about your own experiences with effective forecasting, so leave a comment, or if you have a question, feel free to drop that below as well. Have a great week.